Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Christina Fasonic from California University of Pennsylvania. And actually, today I'm in Wheeling, West Virginia, where we have about 2.5 inches of snow so far. And I'm really grateful that we're not driving to campus on this snowy day because we would miss out on these fantastic presentations that my students will be presenting today. So today you will see the first half of my English 499 senior capstone English students presenting their work. I am really proud of them. Not only have they made it this far in their educations, but during a semester to end all semesters in some ways, such an unusual time for everyone. And not only have they done their work, but they have done it very, very well. And I know that a lot of people think, oh, how can you really build relationships in these little tiny Zoom windows? But I feel like I've really gotten to know all these students pretty well this semester and got to visit them in their homes through the magic of our technology. So maybe even got to know them a little better than I would have if we were in the classroom together, though I do miss that too. So we have our first student up to present her project. Hi, Johanna, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. So are you ready to do this presentation for us today? I know we're all excited.
Yeah, let's get this thing started, I guess.
All right, I'm going to disappear and I'll be back when you're finished.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so my project this semester was titled One is Silver and the Other is Gold. And I started this project over the summer 2020 during the pandemic. And initially, the reason I started it was because I wanted to write a novel and I wanted to study the interrelations between friendships, like what makes friendships what they are and how are they created. But since the semester is as short as it is, I decided just to do a short story on it, just the first chapter for this project. And I'd like to start off with a quote from Jonathan Culler, because I think it relates to my project. It says, "Stories are the main way we make sense of things, whether in thinking of our lives as a progression leading somewhere or in telling ourselves what is happening in the world. It follows not a scientific logic of cause and effect, but the logic of story, where to understand is to conceive of how one thing leads to another, how something might have come about." In essence, what I think Culler is stating is that writers write in order to understand the world and its connectedness. And since my aim is to do exactly the same thing, research and understand the inner workings of friendship through my narrative, I thought this was a particularly nice quote. So throughout my project, my main thing was I wanted to focus on dialogue, because I feel like dialogue not only constructs like the plot line furtherance of the story, but it also gives insight on the character who is speaking. And dialogue is important to me because it's not only what is said, but what is left unsaid in the story. And one important quote that I like to use in reference to this is from The Composition of Everyday Life. It states that dialogue can make an event or memory more real and engaging to the readers. It is most valuable when used to emphasize a main point and show how something is significant rather than to simply convey events. And so that's why I decided to focus on dialogue, because I thought this was very important. Specifically, I used this with my characters, William and Elizabeth. When Elizabeth sells her engagement ring in order to buy groceries for the week, and William makes the statement, well, we can't have you walking around like an unmarried woman. He's showing his love for her, and that he wants her to show that she's married to him. So anyway, my project is grounded in English studies, specifically creative writing, because it is a fiction piece. However, I believe that a lot of my concentration in literature had to do with my project as well, because in literature classes, we analyzed a lot of novels, and through analyzing other people's work, I can assess my own work and emulate in my own writing what they do. And I felt that essays were too restrictive. There's no empathy for the characters or anything like that. So it needed to be a short story. Some of my influences were Dr. McCullough with Lit and Film class. She gave us the novel Secret Life of Bees. And in that story, the main character, Lily, is trying to find out about her dead mother. And so she visits the Boatwright sisters' house, where she learns from her mother, from the three sisters, and each sister tells something different about her mother. And in turn, she not only learns about her mother, but about the person who's telling that story. So that's what I tried to use in my own writing as well, to use my dialogue to show something about the character as well as the plot line. Other influences would be Dr. Carlisle and Dr. Go. They this semester they pushed me to write for publication. And this semester, if I hadn't have had it, I wouldn't be in the Cal Times and in the Inkwell. But I'm happy to say that I am a published writer, and without them, I don't know if I would have had the confidence in my own writing. So they helped me a lot. And lastly, Dr. House, his creative writing fiction class really taught me to just sit down and write. You know, you can't start the journey unless you start the journey, in essence. So anyway, some of my methods for this work were to carry around a notebook. I felt that if I had free time while I was sitting in a doctor's office or out in a parking lot waiting for somebody, then I could use that time to write. And I also felt that I could write down dialogue that other people used, because I wanted to hear natural dialogue and how it worked, so it didn't feel scientific on my page. I wanted to create empathy. So another method that I used was to really study dialogue in the classes that I was currently in with the writings that were required. And Dr. Taylor in English 487 brought an interesting text to light. It was Daniel Webster's Davis, Way Down South. And in that poem, he talks about Southern food and how he likes it. And it was really interesting because a lot of the dialect I could read through, but there were certain words that I'm still puzzled what they mean. And so it showed me like the constraints of how far you can use dialect in your writing. So, because you still want the reader to understand it. So you don't want to lose that connection. And another method that I used was to theorize about my own writing. I took a class called Literature Foundations for English Majors in West Liberty University. And in that class, we read Coller's book, and he said that he gave the importance of who sees. Discussions of narrative frequently speak of the point of view from which a story is told, but this use of point of view confuses two separate questions: who speaks and whose vision is presented. The focalizer may not be the same as the narrator. And I've struggled with this in my own writing. Again, I originally had one character, Elizabeth, a chapter about her, and then a chapter about Joan, and then back to Elizabeth. And I thought, that's too back and forth. So I decided to create an omniscient narrator for my story that could see the thoughts of both characters, but still remain like further back from the scene. And lastly, another method I used was Sierra Jones mentioned that my story emulated similarly in plotline to The Gift of the Magi. So I read it, I must have read it like 3 or 4 times at least. And on the 4th time, I decided to map out the plot line, like how many times she went back and forth between talking about her needing to buy a Christmas present to selling her hair, then back to needing to buy a Christmas present. And I wanted to emulate the significance that was happening in that story. So I mapped it out, and then I did the same thing in my own writing. And I think that it created more empathy and just a more well-rounded story. So yeah, without further ado, we'll get on to my story. I'll read a bit of it for you. Okay, one is silver and the other's gold. Chapter 1. Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other's gold. A circle's round, it has no end. That's how long I want to be your friend. It's the 3rd time that she's had to pawn her engagement ring in order to buy groceries. Normally, she went to the guy on Brownsville, Jim. He's the owner of Little Gems, but she liked to call the place Jim's Gems. She told him each time she was there that he should change the name to Jim's Gems, but Jim just chuckled and counted the money. She walked 20 minutes to get to Jim's just to find out that he wasn't open today. She normally would have called, but she hadn't been able to pay the phone company, so that's been shut off. She really couldn't see to spending the change either, since they had so little already. Her worn-out flats kicked the dust up as she tugged her little boy along. He exhaled a big sigh when he realized they'd went all this way just to change direction. She promised him a candy bar whenever they made it to the store. Just give me a few more steps, little soldier, Elizabeth said. Theo liked being called Little Soldier because it reminded him of his father, to be more like his father. When we get to store, I want biggest candy bar. You got it, she said. To give him credit, Theo kept quiet the rest of the way to the pawn shop. He'd always acted older than his age, which came in handy in times like these, when things weren't going as they had planned. Life seemed to be throwing lots of curveballs at the family lately. It took one hell of a kid not to complain about it. Carrots, onions, celery, chicken, noodles, and a big candy bar for Theo. For breakfast, we can make do with oatmeal again, Elizabeth thought. Elizabeth tallied up the items that she intended to buy at the store. She figured that if she made chicken noodle soup, she could get it to last the whole week until her husband received his next paycheck on Friday. A different pawn shop meant that she couldn't necessarily trust the owner to keep her ring very long. Elizabeth's ring glinted at her as it swayed back and forth, keeping time with their steps. Each time her hand swung up, the sunlight hit the diamond at just the right angle to blind her momentarily. Her ring was a simple engagement ring. It was an emerald-cut diamond set alone as if to bask in its own magnificent glory atop a 14-karat gold band. When the sun hit the stone just right, it screamed, "Yes, this woman is taken." William, Elizabeth's husband, saved majority of his money he had made as a soldier during World War II to pay for it. He often said that Elizabeth was the one good thing that came out of the war. When he came home, the first thing he did was stop at a jewelry store to pick out the ring. A ring that stood on its own setting, as strong and as proud as Elizabeth did, waiting for William to surely come home safe. The ring glared up in Elizabeth's eye again. "You're beautiful," she thought, "but stones can't feed people." "This it, Mommy?" "Sure is. Just 10 minutes and we'll be on our way to the store." "I'm counting." "You don't believe me?" "Not that. I just don't have a watch like Daddy," Theo said. "How am I going to know how close 10 minutes is?" "You trust me," Elizabeth said. "I do trust you, Mommy." Theo grabbed her hand to make Elizabeth look at him. "Always trust you." "Well, all right then." Elizabeth pulled the pawn shop's doors open towards them. All the windows were open in the shop. The door's hinges exhaled as Elizabeth pulled it open. The shop's overhead fan was running so fast that it wobbled, threatening to fall off the ceiling on top of Elizabeth and Theo. Another fan circulated air on the counter. Despite the energy used to move the fan around, the shop's air still hung dense over the two of them. An overweight man leaned his front paws on the glass countertop, oblivious to the grease he attached to the once see-through pane. The man was well underway to balding on his scalp. His back hair crept up and out from under his white tank. The buzzing of a fly caught Elizabeth's attention before she got a chance to greet the shop owner. Theo went straight to the watches. "Do you have any watches that would fit me?" Theo asked, sticking out his string-bean arm. The man took one look down at Theo's bony wrist. "You're going to have to eat more Wheaties, kid." Theo dropped away from the counter and fell in line behind Elizabeth's skirt. Elizabeth put her hand on his shoulder and approached the man behind the counter. "Have anything good to pawn?" the man asked. "I need a temporary loan for groceries this week. I wanted to use my engagement ring as collateral." The man put out his pudgy hand with his palm facing up. Elizabeth struggled to get her ring off her finger. Each time she had to pawn the ring, it gave her resistance at first, like a kid that doesn't want to take a bath. At last, the ring jolted free and Elizabeth handed it over to the man. The man made up his mind before she or Theo could blink. $25. That's just the beginning, but that's it for right now.
Wow, that was really great. That
Thanks.
was really great. And I know when we first started this semester that you were really interested in doing some work with Sylvia Plath, continuing some of that work. How do you feel now compared to what you had planned then to this piece now?
Well, I feel like, I wanted to do Sylvia Plath because I felt like I had to do something in the literature concentration that I was a part of. But I thought, this is my last time to do something for my undergraduate degree. I want to do something that makes me happy. So this really did. And I think that it really went well, especially yesterday. I mean, I redid everything again yesterday, but yeah, it took a lot of revision, but it worked out.
Well, Dr. Go says that she wants to hear more. If you can see her message here. Dr. Go looks a little like a cat today, which is always fun. Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed that. And I think you really nailed the like bringing us into the place where you were. Like, I felt like we were there because of your description and because of the dialogue. It was
Thanks.
good.
It took a lot of
really
research. Like I placed it in the 50s and I had to do a lot of research on, okay, what do engagement rings look like at this time period? What kind of toys can Theo play with? That kind of thing. So it was really interesting to have to do that research as well.
Absolutely. You did a really, really great job. I look forward to reading the whole thing. And I feel like I'm really lucky because all the people listening, they don't get to read the whole projects, but I do. So anyways, all right, let's bring up Bryce. He is next. I'll see you later. Thank you, Johanna. Wonderful work.
Thanks.
Okay, let me find Bryce. Bryce, hi.
Hello, how are you?
I am good. So you have a poetry project to read us today, right? To
Yeah.
tell us about.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to disappear and let you do that, and I'll be back on in a few minutes to talk with you about it.
All right, thanks, Dr. Vasonic.
Sure.
All right, so yeah, for my senior capstone project, I decided to write a chapbook. I find that when I was writing more and more, I feel like I write in collections rather than, poems here and there. And I've come to find out that it's because of OCD, and I got diagnosed with OCD relatively recently. And it harkens back to something that Dr. House told me way back when, is that, sometimes you set out to write a poem and you write a poem for the exact meaning that you want it to, but sometimes the meaning comes back to you in the poem. And I've been thinking about that a lot recently. But yeah, my project is titled Evenfall, which is usually one word, and it usually is in reference to dusk or twilight. And I split it up into 2 words for the title because I find that I'm writing about balance and I'm writing about movement. And so this whole project was about the idea of falling and what we grasp onto. And it's daunting to think about when I was writing this project, to think about I have to produce my best work and I have to culminate everything that I've learned throughout my entire college career, my 5 years here as a 5th-year senior. But then the more you think about something, the more pressure it gives you. But if you don't think about it, I mean, the English faculty here have been preparing me for this for, my whole career here. And then I think I would be remiss to not talk about Dr. House being the main mentor as a creative writing major he's just helped tremendously, and he's been a fan and a cheerleader, and telling me how much I've grown. One of the best things he's ever done for me, and I know he will tell me that I'm not the greatest of students, but we were meeting for creative writing poetry, and we were going over some of my work, and he was reading it, and he was like, "You write very urgently, you write very desperately," and I think that's something I tried to capture here. I find that the work that I like to read the most has some urgency to it, like it needs to be read. And he recommended an author named Richard Seiken, who wrote a poetry collection called Crush, and it has been by far the biggest inspiration to me that I could think of. Seiken is just tremendously desperate in his words, and it makes you feel like you need to read this. And that's something that I tried to capture in my writing since then, and I think I did it well in this collection. But I mean, all of the English faculty have helped me in some way or form. I mean, Dr. Goodwin, who was relatively new when I took creative writing fiction with him, he delivered that kind of sternness and stubbornness and, hey, you need to do this. And he was very blunt with me about, being real and not trying to be a writer. And that's something that only recently I've come to appreciate, especially with reading Charles Bukowski, who is not a widely celebrated poet in the English literary world. But I think he's been such an inspiration to me because, one of my favorite quotes from him is someone asked him, what does it mean to be a writer? And he says, you either get it down on paper or you jump off a bridge. And I've always loved that. And I think that sticks to also the desperation of needing to get this out. And writing for me has always been, something that I've just needed to do. Writers like Sylvia Plath and their confessionalism in analyzing the self has been super important to me as well. And that's something that I tried to deliver in Evenfall as well. Evenfall is also a love letter to autumn. It's a love letter to moments. I mean, I feel as writers, we have such an infatuation with sensory details and sensory moments. And I find the things that I love and remember the most are sensory. Another quote from Charles Bukowski, just to go back to Bukowski, who's been a huge influence on me, is on his gravestone. It just says, "Don't try." And I think even Dr. House, if he was being honest, would tell you that in the early stages of me taking his classes, I was trying too hard to be a writer and not just be a person who writes. I was trying hard to be inspiring and not writing because I was inspired. And so I find that I'm listening to the world more. And another one of Dr. House's quotes that I always love is that being a poet, especially, is not knowing how to write, it's knowing everything. So I find myself doing research on trees and why some trees stop producing leaves quicker than others, and why roots grow towards the sound of water. And like, you just find yourself researching everything and you want to know everything that you're talking about. And I think that's super important as well. Dr. Vanderlyn and showing me Sylvia Plath and making sure that we review and being able to analyze one of my favorite poems, Tulips, has been super important. Dr. Downey with allowing, most of her classes are literature based, and telling me that you can do as a project creative works. And I wrote a play for Dr. Downey, and just the encouragement of creative works in all of the English classes that I've taken has just been super helpful, because I think creativity in high school and middle school is often taught out of us. And it's just been something that I've really appreciated in my time here as an English major. But yeah, so I'm going to read to you a few poems from my chapbook collection, which I hope to be my introduction into the literary market. I self-published a book called Pulp earlier this year, but it wasn't written in the way that would be accessible to most literary markets. And in this one, I tried to clean it up. And yeah, I wrote a little chapbook this semester, and this is Evenfall. The first poem in the collection is called Endless. And we're off. Down, down, ready, set, in dawn. The grass drying, dampening, and freezing, born to fall in flight. The moment the world opens its jaws to our heartbeats, tears on the white tile, blood on the gown, the world is unfair, and that is why we cry the moment we slide into existence. I used to believe that infants did not cry if the parents were in love, and now I find the times I cry the most are when I'm in love. If you want to talk about purpose, you gotta fall, and the longer the fall, the more it feels like flying. How often we get caught standing still while others launch towards the ground, and it feels for a moment that we are going backwards. I've thrown the clocks against the walls, started measuring time in moments, so when someone asks me how old I am, I tell them I am endless. A woman out of college tells me I think I'm God, and I tell her I think I'm better because I can feel endless love in the end, in all these moments when I grasp at the colors of the world and pretend I don't only dream in red, who tells me, tightening on her branch, that other colors are better suited for hearts like mine. And I bleed these blue lines from me to her, from my hands to her mouth, because falling in love feels a lot like bleeding out, waking in the hospital, and being diagnosed with forever. Somehow, some way, I know that I chose this body in this life from the comfort of a deathbed some years ago, and that creature decayed and thought about what life meant to them, and that soul chose this body in this life. My soul knows death like the back of every hand that has touched my cheek, and it begged for struggle, so I can't complain. Falling up and falling down, the red of the world, making sure I stay present in this moment. And the next poem I will read is called Tree Rings. Maybe if I can find it. Oh no, the next poem I'm going to read you is Corduroy Arms, sorry. Corduroy Arms. How the summer days lied to us, stretched the rays out too thin, associating the waves with the sunshine, how we lied to ourselves all too often. Fall isn't where the sidewalk ends, it's where our hands tuck into our pockets, where our footsteps become trudges, urgent. Light my cigarette, get me home, tell me what we are so I know what to get you for Christmas. And honestly, we're all just trying to crawl into each other's sweaters for more nights than just one. Because there is something about the cold that makes the tea taste better and makes our bodies feel like huts. There's something to say about a shaky draw from a cigarette, an excuse to suffer for a moment, taste the crop of the world, embedded with human tampering, watch the blankets fall, and lick at each other's laps. I find the people who love winter also love the fall, enamored by the moments where we all can finally appreciate the heat of a heartbeat and wipe our hands clean of death while nature buries herself in the snow. And then I will read another poem. All right, now I'll read Tree Rings. Sometimes when we fall, it's because we jumped, or sometimes it's just how the tree decays, and escaping is the auburn touch of leaves, but where we go, no one knows, and often we just end up in the gutter. Sometimes when we fall for good. The wind never rests, it just gets a little colder. I'll get put inside a book somewhere. You always could remember the color of my steep decline. In some ways, I waited for it all to slowly trickle down and circle back like seasons or our heartbeats or the fingers in our mouths that keep feeding us our fires. Some days we feel broken, or the world does. We don't know which one it is yet. There is something to say about gravity and the need to keep our feet wet in each other's water. Sometimes I'm too heavy for this body, for these 7 steps and 7 more that circle around the heartbeat of this easel when I write like every day. My tree has felt too many seasons. Sometimes leaving is the start of something we never could believe in before. We cut down these limbs like waterfalls and roll into the sea and call it God. Something's always God when our human eyes discover sights unseen, the urge for something better always falling from our trees that we cut down at the roots just to get a better view of where we're heading. Somewhere in the strings that send the blood from our hands to the throat of destination, the cold in the air arriving in our mouths just to send it back out. Another cycle, another ring inside myself, keeping the time. And that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed it.
I must admit, by the way, that was fantastic, but I must admit I was hoping for the deer piece to show up.
I thought about it.
That is such a wonderful piece of writing, but all of your poetry is very good. And I can tell that obviously before you got to my class that you had spent a lot of time working on your art. And I know, like everyone else in the class, you'll do big things. So thank you for sharing that. And I think everybody should go out and buy a copy of your book. It's on Amazon, right?
Yep, it's still on Amazon.
And remind us of the title again.
Pulp, P-U-L-P.
Yes, you can find it there if you want to read more of Bryce's work. Thank you very much, Bryce.
Thank you.
And next up is Raven. So let me pull her up on the screen. Hi, Raven.
Hello. How are you?
How are you? Good.
I'm good. I'm a little anxious. Going after Johanna and Bryce. They're both like really talented writers, so I'm a little anxious, but excited.
Well, you are too. And your piece that you'll be talking about is called Rose's Son, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So I will disappear. Oh, we got some comments from Dr. Taylor and from Dr. Go for Bryce's presentation. Dr. Taylor is like, nice. And of course, Dr. Go has already purchased a copy of Bryce's book. So not to give you any more pressure, Raven.
I know. I purchased his book as well. I read all of it. I told him it's really good. So
it is. It's very, very good. And your work is also quite good. And I know that throughout the semester that you've been working steadily towards like, what is this? How does this fit together? And so I'm really excited about hearing how you put it all together. So I'm going to disappear and let you do that.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm a literature major, and I also decided to focus on a creative writing piece. For me, it was more just like coming out of a comfort zone. So mostly as a literature major, I, read things analytically, approach things with like like how and why, but not really like thought of myself as a writer. I wrote this paper for a creative writing class with Dr. House like 2 semesters ago. It was the first time I ever really wrote a creative writing piece. I never really thought about it, never thought I'd be good at it. And for me, it was just something that it was different. And from that paper, I was able to write other creative writing pieces. And now I even have the possibility of maybe submitting something to get published. It really opened up more doors for me. So it just felt natural to work on this as like my final goodbye to being, you know, my undergrad here at Cal. I had a high school English teacher that always told us to write like a reader whenever we were stuck, you know, writing a poem or short story, whatever, to write like a reader. So for me, I really draw inspiration from other things around me, things I read, things I write, things, you know, music, whatever around me that is inspiring. So for my critical introduction, I really did focus on different novels, different authors that I'm inspired by. One book that I really love, I still reference to this day, The Best American Short Stories of the Century by John Updike. We read that in Dr. House's, I think, creative writing fiction class, and I love it. Some of the authors in that book I discovered for the first time, like Joyce Carol Oates and Alice Elliott Dark. Some of those pieces I reference to this day, and I was really inspired by. When it comes to method for me, for like keeping track of things that inspire me, things I want to write about, I keep the notes app in my phone. I keep it full of things that inspire me, you know, a conversation I hear, something I see. I just jot these little things down, and then I go home and I, you know, write a little piece on it, use it for maybe a research project, something like that I base it off of. So for my paper, I wrote this for a creative writing class, and a lot of the notes I got were that there was a lot of characters, there was a lot of like dialogue, it was a little confusing. So for my capstone project, I really wanted to focus on like honing in specific characteristics, making the characters more noticeable, because it centers on a family, and there's a lot of different members of this family coming in and out. There's aunts, cousins, uncles. So I eliminated some characters and made some stand out a little more. Maybe gave a character an extra scene, an extra paragraph to really define themselves. So I guess character definition is something that I really worked on. So the excerpt that I am going to be reading is towards the end, so I want to get everybody caught up. My story begins with my main character, who's Rose. The title is Rose's Son, so it centers around her and her family. She's having an emotional moment with her daughter, Michaela. She's telling her about her son that her family didn't really know about, doesn't talk about. She was sharing this moment with Michaela. I really wanted it to be emotional. I wanted it to be like showing this connection between mother and daughter. And this is a flashback scene. And then after she has this moment, we jump to present day where her aunt has passed away and they're a very wealthy family. So I focus a lot on like the, you know, Upper East Side, like big mansions, like bougie, luxurious lifestyle. So their aunt dies and Rose's nephew Maverick inherits an estate, a big house, a bunch of money. So they're like gonna travel to see the house, to share some time together, reflect, because Rose spent a lot of time with this house. She has a deep connection with it. So she wants to go, and she takes Maverick, her daughter Michaela, Maverick's fiance Samuel goes, and Maverick's sister June goes. And I'm going to begin reading the excerpt from my story. "Aunt Rose, get up here now, please," yelled Maverick from somewhere upstairs. Rose placed the picture frame she was holding back to its original dusty spot and rushed up the narrow wooden staircase that led into the second-floor sitting room. She heard several voices continue to speak as she climbed the staircase. When Rose crossed into the sitting room, she could tell that Maverick was located in the bedroom to the left, and she saw that the door was wide open. She paused for just a second as she heard a third voice that she didn't recognize. Rose then marched into the room, prepared to argue with a bank employee about them being there, even though she had called yesterday and was told that visiting today would be fine. She found Maverick and Samuel standing above a third man, who was sitting in an unmade bed. This man appeared to have been sleeping, and his short blonde hair looked messy. "Who's this?" Rose asked everyone, with her arms wide open, signaling her apparent confusion. Maverick answered quickly, cutting off the blonde man before he could speak. "He says he lives here. I think he's some kind of squatter. Should we call the police?" "I am not a squatter for the last time, and call the police so I can get this horde of people out of my house," replied the man. He was very young, around the same age as Michaela by appearance. He had blue-green eyes and furrowed his thick eyebrows at Maverick whenever he spoke. "Everyone just stop. Okay, sir, who are you? This is my aunt's house," and the man interrupted her. "This is my aunt's house. She died like 6 months ago, and I got the deed to prove it. Let me get up, and I will find it." Maverick, clearly annoyed by the supposed trespasser, said, "This guy is full of it. I was left my great-aunt Carly's estate. It was in her will, and I got the paperwork yesterday." Instead of arguing back, the unknown man stepped out of the bed, walked over to a dresser with 6 drawers and a large square mirror attached to the top. He opened the top drawer and shuffled papers around for a few seconds before pulling out whatever he was looking for. Look, I got a letter too. It says right here that upon the passing of Carly Elizabeth Ward, the estate in question will be left financially and physically to the rights of Ivan Caleb Ward, which is me. Case closed. The man now known as Ivan looked up and was greeted with 3 faces of confusion and silence. He expected more of an argument, but everyone remained silent. Rose turned away from the man. She spotted a green desk chair and sat down. She looked down at her boots rather than continue looking at her family. I got the exact same letter, but it said my name. This has to be some bank error, right? Questioned Maverick. All 3 men continued looking at Rose, waiting for an answer or some type of clarification. She finally responded, she must have made this will out when Maverick was born and never changed it. Okay, so if we all have the same aunt, then that makes us related. I assumed this Carly was a distant rich old aunt that I had never heard of. How are you related to her? Asked Ivan. Rose remained silent, blankly staring to the left. She heard the boys discussing possibilities and how this situation even happened. Rose knew she had to tell them what actually happened. She was secretly cursing her aunt for not revising her will since the 90s. Okay, I'll clear things up. Ivan, Maverick is your first cousin, mother, sister, son. Carly is your mother's aunt and therefore your great aunt. Mother, sister, son. There was just my mom and you, though, I thought, replied Maverick. Samuel remained silent this entire time and considered if leaving the room would make things less awkward or more apparently weird. Ivan is Michaela's brother. He's my son. Rose said this to Maverick, not Ivan. She had not seen her son since he was about 6 months old. She couldn't help but see how much he resembled her side of the family. She wanted to joke about this, something like, thank God you got my looks, but just remained serious. I was adopted. I never knew my real parents, Ivan said quietly while slowly returning to his seat on the bed. She must have left the estate to the 2 baby boys, never updated the damn thing. Rose wanted to get up and hug her son, who she hadn't seen in over 2 decades. She wanted to explain to him and how he was wrongfully taken from her. She just sat in silence instead. Michaela would ask about her brother from time to time, and the rest of the family knew not to ask. She wasn't prepared for this moment, especially not in a house with so many memories that she would have loved to share with her son. Hey, what are you guys doing? June's voice echoed through the room outside of the bedroom, and footsteps ascending the staircase grew louder and louder. Rose wanted to shut the door and lock everyone out. She wanted to yell back that everything was fine and to meet them at the car. She stood from the desk chair and straightened her gray sweatshirt. All 4 of them locked eyes and stayed quiet, waiting for the 2 girls to walk into the bedroom. I think they're in this room, to the left. Michaela's voice struck Rose in a way that it never had before. She was back in her bedroom 12 years ago when she explained to her daughter that she had a son. She looked into Michaela's deep brown eyes and noted the innocence of being in elementary school and excitedly explaining to a parent how your day went. Rose remembered holding her daughter's hand while telling her, you should know that you're not alone, not an only child. Your family tree is a branch bigger. I hope you get to meet him and love him the way I love your aunt. Rose remembered hugging her daughter that day and answering every question as honestly as she could. This gave her the strength to be honest once again to everyone. Michaela and June entered the bedroom and quickly flashed faces of confusion to Maverick and Rose. Who's that? Asked June. Rose walked over to her daughter and hugged her, just as tightly as she had done that day years and years ago. Mom, what? Michaela started before Rose pulled away from her hug. The formation of tears paused her daughter's question. This is Ivan, your older brother. That's the ending. That's all of it. So, yeah.
Wow. That is quite a journey, right?
Yeah.
So were there any surprises as you were working on this?
I mean, I really wanted to focus on the drama without being like cheesy. I didn't want to be like soap opera-y. So,
yes.
yeah.
Well, I think that's really hard, especially when you're dealing with relationships and surprises in relationships. Like, how do you tell an authentic story without making it like Days of Our Lives or The Young and the Restless or something like that, or Melrose Place, or pick your drama. But I think you've done a really good job with it. And you got some applause from Dr. Taylor, who gives you a clap. So, yeah, it's this weird situation. We would have all been in the same room together somewhere on our campus, but here we are in this virtual space. So you did a very good job. Thank you, Raven. Okay, so next up is Rachel, and I will bring her on. Hello, Rachel.
Hi.
How are you?
Nervous, heart pounding, sweaty.
You will be great. And there's no one here that can boo you, so you don't have to worry about that. You'll be fantastic. So what are you going to tell us about today?
I'm going over my collection for this project. It's going to be Childhood Memories, a Remembrance of Life and Death. And I'm going to be reading excerpts or my poems from the collection from the middle section. And it's going to be titled The Night It Happened.
I am looking forward to hearing you read these because although I've read some of them already, I haven't heard them in your voice. So I'm looking forward to that.
We'll see.
Nah, you'll be great. Okay, I'm going to disappear and give you the stage.
All right, thank you. So, hi, my name is Rachel, and my experience in English has grown exponentially at my time in college. Every class I take, I learn something new. A great example of this would be from British Literature, English 301 with Dr. Downey in the fall of 2018. I remember when we read Beowulf, and I never read it in high school or before that, so it was my first time reading it. And while I was reading it, I was thinking like, oh, this is technically a poem, like a heroic epic. And I was like, oh, well, wow, that's a poem. I didn't know poems like that existed. And that is one of the times that a class has really perked my interest in poetry and what has inspired me to create this collection. Another instance would be in Dr. Haas's Creative Writing Poetry, English 377 in spring 2019. I remember for this one assignment, we had to read poems for the person he chose for us. I'm going to butcher the name. Tarfia Faizula, I think that's right, wrote Self-Portrait as Mango. I'll read a short excerpt. I'll blur out the B word though. She says, "Your English is great. How long have you been in our country?" I say, "Suck on a mango, B word, since that's all you think I eat anyway." And that's my favorite poem ever, other than Emily Dickinson's River Run to Thee. But I enjoy the start of the poem because expressing yourself comes in many forms, including insults, but it's more insightful to hear or see what you think in that moment when you are in that type of situation. And that's mainly what's going to be represented in my collection, my thoughts and my memories of what I was feeling. Freeform is one of the types of poetry that I'm going to be using, well, mainly using. And it's because you can manipulate the words, the form, the content, really everything about it, and you can just make it your own. You can push the boundary. And that's deeply important for me. For my hearers here, I have felt that with poetry, I never really got the chance to express myself properly and often felt pressured by deadlines. So when it came time to deliver my stuff to the teachers or submit them, I felt like it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't my work. It felt like somebody else's. And it wasn't. It was mine, but I felt incomplete. I felt like I didn't do a good enough job. And that's what I'm focusing on for this project. I want to make it my own. I want to dedicate myself into putting my best work forward because this is my final hurrah of, well, impressing you, the audience. And my collection is about poetry and breaking boundaries of what could be poetry or what could be free-form poetry. My work is more of a prosy, storytelling, nonfiction kind of thing. And I think it's a different thing for me to do. And I really appreciate that I can do it. Because in other classes, I felt like I couldn't. And it took a lot of time. The genre of poetry in CalU is really a staple in the English studies. One of the students, Bryce Frye, as previously mentioned, he wrote and independently published his own poetry collection, a book named Pulp. It's on Amazon. And when I read it, I was like incredibly shocked at how good it was. And I was like, I want to be like that. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to feel the way that I felt reading that. But I want other people to feel that way when they read my stuff. So congratulations, Bryce. You really got to your audience. Proud of you. As creative writers, we try to break boundaries, whether those boundaries are creative techniques or emotional boundaries set by ourselves. And that is what I'm doing with this project. Childhood Memories, a remembrance of life and death, is written in order to help people that went through grief or is at the point in their life where they have lost somebody and they do not know how to feel. They feel empty. They feel lost, so to speak. I didn't feel the need to relate to someone about death of loved ones because I thought I did not need it when I was younger, and even recently, but I was wrong. So when I wrote this collection, I meant for it to give someone a different side of relation to grief. To present my work, I will be using freeform, but I wanted to make the connection easier for people who do not have the need to analyze deeper words like every English major. So that will be an experience for you guys. Hopefully don't analyze it too much. I express my grief through these real life experience poems, and I hope you enjoy them. This is from the section, The Night It Happened. My poetry collection has 3 sections. In order, it is Before, The Night It Happened, and Living Life After. This is the first poem. It's not in order technically, it's kind of cut off, but chronologically, from this point on, the first poem, it is in order. It is called Car Ride Home. My friend's mom kept looking, rear view mirror, eyes on me. My eyes focused on the window, where I saw flashes of red and blue, cop cars piled in the driveway. What happened? My next poem is called My Mother's Arms, and the title of the poem starts off the poem. My mother's arms comfort me better than a month ago when my cousin said, "Oh, Grandpa died." My mother let me know in a better way. Your father loved you very much. And as she hugged me, I already knew what she meant. There wasn't a need for 5 stages. The next poem is titled The Emptiness Within. Going inside felt different. Emptiness filled the soul. Hollowness, a carved out lobster shell. Sitting on my bed, looking at the wall, was peaceful. There was no pictures to look at in my room. My relative came in. I didn't ask her to. Another one came and sat on my bed. I thought to myself, funny. Isn't it impolite not to knock? Slowly dragging myself, went to my parents' bedroom. Sorry, my mother's bedroom. My next poem is titled Filling the Void. Mother tells me, "You are sleeping in here tonight." Emotionally numb, I say yes. No. Head empty, I want to be alone. I want to be alone. Cry all night so she won't see. She won't see. A voice starts repeatedly. Do it for her. Do it for her. Do it for her. She needs you more than you need her. Do it for her. I comply with the voice, agreeing. Now it is my time to comfort her, to help her like she has helped me in so many times before, to be there. when my father isn't. So I do it for her. And that is it. That is the end of my work so far.
Thank you for sharing those with us, Rachel. I remember when we first did a peer review of your collection, that line where you talk about sort of in that moment, you're with your mother and there's no need for the 5 stages of grief because it all came in through that one moment. And that was really, I think, a remarkable way of ending that particular piece of your collection. So thank you so much for sharing with us.
Of course. Thank
That
you
was
for having me.
really great. You did a good job.
Thank you.
All right. So up next we have Kortnie. Thank you again, Rachel. Hi, Kortnie.
Hi.
Oh, by the way, Dr. Go said that Rachel did a great job. She's a great reader. So that's good. And she also got some starry smiles from Dr. Taylor. So what do you have for us today, Kortnie?
I have my project called Sense of Self, which is a working title. I'm really bad at titles, so that's what it is for now. It's kind of like a literary analysis of myself. We're going to be seeing some memoir pieces from me, and then I'll read a poem. And I don't have my analysis written out for the poem, but if I have time, I'll talk about it, I'm sure.
Okay. Yeah. And I remember, like other people in the class, where you sort of had, okay, this is what I want to do, but how do I do it? How do I do it? How do I do it? And you kept asking yourself that question and working on it. So I can't wait to read sort of this final thing and how it all fits together in the end. Do you feel pretty good about your final project?
Yeah. The more I write it, the more I realize how much I have to do, but it's coming together, and it's taking the edge off.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I can't wait to hear what you read for us today. Okay, I'm going to disappear, and I'll see you in a few minutes.
Okay. Okay, so my name is Kortnie Gould, and this is a multi-genre project. I'll talk about that later. I think it's more along the lines of creative writing. I'm a creative writing concentration. And the fact that I'm even here today doing this presentation means a lot to me because I failed my first semester at Cal. It was online. I was going for nursing. Not what I wanted to do, failed it. And then I was undecided for a while. And when I picked creative writing, I was really excited. And then I took poetry with Dr. House. And I'm a really bad poet. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe this isn't what I should do. But I'm glad I stuck it out because I really do think it's what I'm meant to be doing. So this project is called Sense of Self, and I took a little quote for myself from my critical introduction, and I am mostly curious if the common traumatic experiences shared by the majority of creative writers is detectable in my own work. And so this project was inspired greatly by a project I did last semester in English 308 Research for Writers. It was taught by Dr. Taylor, and our final project was an academic writing project, and it had to pertain to our major concentration. So I decided to research the psychology of creative writers and how it may be unique to us, or there may be patterns seen within them because myself and my fellow writers, I don't know, I just feel like we see things a different way. And I found out the most common illnesses seen in writers are mood disorders, so including depression, bipolar disorder, and cyclothymia. There was a study done by Jane Pierto of 160 writers, and 61% of the male writers and 66% of the female writers reported experiencing frequent moving, poverty, prejudice, racism, neglect, abuse, sexual abuse, incest, abandonment by one or both parents, mental illness in one or both parents, parental alcoholism, loss of sibling or one or both parents, or suicide in the family. And that's some pretty heavy stuff to go through. And all of the research I did said that, you know, if these things happen to you, you're not going to become a writer. But if you're resilient and you reflect on yourself, that's kind of what takes these traumatic experiences and turns you into a writer. Other classes that inspired me are obviously my creative writing classes besides poetry. with Dr. House, namely creative writing fiction, which I wrote a story called One Way for that class, and there will be excerpts included in my project, but I'm not going to read any from that today. And then English 430 adaptation of literary materials, in which I adapted a story of Snow White. And I'm also not going to read that one today, but it'll be in there. And Dr. Taylor's course, English 352 Studies in Writing, which I took in the fall of 2019, we studied memoir, and we had to write a memoir as our final project. And I had never even written a diary. I've never kept a journal. So writing about myself was a whole new experience. And it was very cathartic, and I really liked it. And when I was coming up with my idea for this project, I was actually sitting at my computer right before class started, and I had nothing. I didn't know what I was bringing to class, like what my project was going to be. And I kept thinking about my academic writing project, about the psychology of creative writers, and this memoir project. And sense of self just like came to me, and I wrote everything down. I wrote down an outline, and it's coming together. So like I said, it's a multi-genre approach. So there will be sections of memoir writing. All of the memoir writing is new. I'm going to be including the memoir that I wrote for my final project, but I'm not sure how it's going to be included yet. I'll probably insert that last. And then the memoir writing will either be preceded or followed, basically just intermingled with pre-existing works of fiction and poetry. I do have a poem for you today. It's new. Everything I'm reading today has never been read or like heard before, so pretty excited. And then after my work of fiction or poetry, there will be like an analysis, a literary analysis of myself pretty much. And that's why it's called Sense of Self, because it's like looking at who I am as a person and where I come from, and then how does that manifest into my writing. So I'm going to read for you now. And I would just like to say that what I'm about to read does have some sensitive subjects. There's a made-up scenario that's pretty violent, and there's also an instance of like physical punishment. So if you are uncomfortable with listening to those things, I would not be offended if you had to mute me or didn't want to listen to this. But I'm going to start reading that now. Okay. In one of my first memories of my father, he appears very tall, but it's only because I had to tilt my chin all the way to the sky to see his face. I was at least 5 years old, making my brother 7 at the time. The two of us were not allowed to play in our front yard as children. The front yard is sizable enough, but too close to the main road for my parents' comfort. Besides, our backyard provided more than enough room for active play. The house we moved from had no front yard, and virtually no backyard either, so it wasn't the size of the yard that factored into our decision-making. It was the fact that my father was already in the backyard, and we didn't want to be around him. He caught us, of course, and was clearly unhappy with our disobedience. Perhaps unhappy isn't the word for it, since unhappy was pretty much his default setting when I was growing up. Rather, he was deliriously angry. "Do you know why you can't play in the front yard?" he asked me and my brother as he towered over us, face red and voice cracking with the volume of his words. I shook my head no at him. "Because if you're in the front yard and no one is around to watch you, you can get kidnapped. If you're taken by a stranger, you'll never see us again. They will take you somewhere, strip off all of your clothes, chain you up, and shoot you while you cry." He made a finger gun, pointed it at me, and raised the flesh barrel to the sky. Bang. The fear felt just like a bullet. "You'll be crying for your mommy and daddy, and we won't be around to hear you. No one would save you." I can't speak for my brother, but being kidnapped is still a major fear of mine to this day. My dad's father died when he was 21, and I often wonder who he would be if he got to keep that influence in his life. Both of my parents speak highly of my late grandfather, but I'm not quite convinced. My dad is a big fan of physical punishment. He thinks it's his God-given right to put his hands on what he perceives as his. The last time my dad hit me as punishment, I was 17 years old. My mom had been getting on me about vacuuming my room, so I was finally going to do it. He works from home and was on a conference call while I was dragging the sweeper up the stairs, which was almost as tall and heavy as I was, so it wasn't the quietest of tasks. By the time I got the vacuum into my room and plugged in, he came bursting in with rage. "Why are you being so loud? I'm trying to work," he asked me. "Mom told me to vacuum," I deadpanned, trying not to give him a reaction that might make things worse. "I could hear you banging it all the way up the stairs. You're going to break it." He was coming at me by that point. The rest is a blur. But as he began to hit me, I used my hands to fend him off, which pissed him off further. He wrestled me to the ground, pinned me face first into my carpet, and held my hands behind my back as he continued his assault until he was satisfied. Every time I think of that, it reminds me of a story he loves to tell about his father. My dad didn't care how old we were. If we deserved to get our asses beat, we got our asses beat, he always says. One time I was 16 and mouthing off to my mom, and she told my dad about it when he got home from work. I knew he was coming for me, so I locked my door, but he broke it down and beat me until I was sorry. He is consistent in that every retelling, there's a tone of pride in his voice, a look of amusement on his face, a reminiscent glint in his eyes. What a legacy to live up to. My dad was raised by country folk through and through, and his mother's family hails from Greene County, Pennsylvania, a county that still to this day faces problems with the distribution of KKK propaganda. On a road trip home from visiting family, I wrote 2 little lines of poetry inspired by the scenery. I wasn't sure where they would end up, but they turned into a poem inspired by the culture of people my dad comes from and still immerses himself in. This is American Thick. In the land where guns go off no matter what time the yoke bleeds out of the horizon are the dead and staggered fields of Pennsylvania, stacked brown and dry like American tiramisu. People in regions won by the North retreat into houses flagged red by char-grilled X's, navy blue like the sky blanketing their heads, frosted with more stars than they fear to count. Backwoods men like my daddy hunt their prey by word of mouth, feed each other rumors of where best to traipse, track, and trace, only trust kinfolk to process what they slay. Proofed in awe of the non-typical, I yield for the buck whose decorated antlers slice the air in directions I fail to follow, but I still serve my daddy the beast's description, so the next time he has an appetite to kill, he can cook up an excuse for wild abandon. And that's the ending of the poem. American Thick, so the title is because there's a lot of food imagery. I don't know if you heard it. I tried to use words about food to talk about kind of like in America, you know, we have an obesity problem. That's part of it. The region we live in, Appalachia or Pittsburghese, we have a thick dialect or accent. That's another reason why it's called American Thick. And thick is also a word for not the smartest. And I feel like some of the people that have been brought into my life from my father's influence are not the brightest. So that's why it's called American Thick. But that's all I have for you.
Thank you for that. Dr. Vanderlyn had a comment for you. She says, very nice work, Kortnie. Powerful stuff, great imagery. And I agree, the images there are absolutely fabulous. So you feel like it's finally fitting together better. Yeah. And I can tell from this piece. So wonderful, wonderful work.
Thank you.
We have one more presentation today, and we do have more on Thursday. And next we have Noah. Let's bring him up. Noah, finally. It's hard, it's hard to go last, and it's hard to go first. So what do you have for us today?
Yeah, so today I am giving you a brief exploration of some confessional poetry that I've written, kind of in response to a lot of problems I've had over the past few years and my overcoming of them. So, right.
Yes. Well, and I think like other people in this class, you've done a really good job, and I'm proud of you for being brave and talking about those experiences. Not only is it difficult because you relive them in a sense, it's difficult for yourself, but I think it's difficult for others too, for you to express that to other people, because people are judgmental. And when you put yourself out there, you don't know if it's going to change people's perception of you or not. So great job sharing that, deeply personal work. And I know that part of it is for yourself, but part of it is for other people who might read that and get inspiration, or at least feel a kind of kinship for having had similar experiences.
Yeah, that's kind of my goal. If I can help someone else avoid all the crap, I'm happy to do it. Expedite it. So.
Sure. Excellent.
Are we ready?
Well, I am going to disappear and let you take the stage. Yes.
Hi, everyone. Composed of revealing confessional poetry, my capstone project is a self-revelatory one, in which I confront the troubles and obstacles within my life that I have faced for the past several years. Specifically, I delve into and give insight into the divorce from my short-lived marriage and the subsequent severe depression and alcoholism that followed. These poems also give light and pay tribute to my overcoming of these troubles and struggles that had long dominated my daily life. While writing and compiling this poetry, I was forced to face the difficult questions that I had long put out of my mind. What were the causes and sources of my troubles? Why was I continuing down the path that I had fallen into? Why was I so fixated upon the nostalgic memories of a destructive relationship? How had I contributed to my fall from grace? And most importantly, what could I do to change my ways and propel myself into a better, more productive future? My poetry, in a very real sense, is an answer to these questions and concerns. In writing, some of the answers that I had come to recognize were uncomfortable and shameful, and forced me to make a reevaluation of myself and all that I had believed. I had realized that while writing, that I, myself, was the source of my problems and struggles. I had realized that I had long been blaming others, mainly my ex-wife, for my problems and addiction. I had realized that I was stuck on a path of self-destruction and self-loathing, fueled by the cyclical nature of pleasure and pain relating to alcohol abuse and occasional drug use, and that I would be stuck on this downfall, lest I make some serious changes in my life. I had realized that I was so focused on the past, specifically my marriage, glorifying and romanticizing it all the way, in hindsight, because I was, at present, lonelier than I had ever been. I realized my choices were not just hurting myself, but also disrupting the lives of the people that I cared most for, my friends and family. While writing my poetry, I searched myself for a way to change my ways. And it was in my writing that I discovered that my poetry, my thoughts and emotions on paper, served as a way to process and accept my past, my flaws, my downfalls, and in turn, served as a way to change and improve my life. While I've experimented with a very small amount of poetry over the years, my fascination with and appreciation of confessional poetry, as well as my exploration of myself and my personal struggles through poetry, began in a creative writing course with Dr. Brent House here at CalU. This course, interestingly enough, has been my first poetry course. I simply never found that much interest in poetry before. However, I am thankful that I decided to take this course. In fact, some of the poems found within my capstone project were first drafted in the class, including the second poem I'll be reading this afternoon, Barstool. Dr. House's continued dedication to and interest in poetry and his sharing of his experience and insight inspired me to further dabble in poetry, not just within class, but without. Within this course, we have explored the ways in which poetry can be interpreted. We have been encouraged to explore poetry that speaks to us, or makes us think differently, or explore different perspectives. This exploration of perspectives, I believe, has led to a greater appreciation of poetry as a whole within myself. I was fortunate to have this new experience to further my skills within the field of poetry, which I fully tapped into when composing my capstone project. Within this course with Dr. House, I have learned to better use the tools available to the poet, as well as being able to think like a poet. Being encouraged to explore the varied experiences that I've lived through, finding meaning behind these experiences, then transcribing my thoughts and emotions to paper for others to see and reflect upon, and perhaps, one day, improve their own lives. In this course, I and my fellow student poets tapped into the experience and wisdom of great poets, studying poems and exams such as Donald Ravel's The Art of Attention, Ellen Bryant Voigt's The Art of Syntax, and James Longebach's The Art of the Poetic Line. The advice and insight within the pages of these books gave me a greater awareness of both the mechanical requirements of writing poetry and the bravery associated with sharing one's most private thoughts and emotions. And I used the very same lessons to improve my capstone project. It is also these lessons and insights that I ground my project even further in my English studies, gaining a greater range of literary knowledge and writing skills. Now, I do have a few poems that I'd like to share, one from each chapter of my project. There are three. The first of which comes from chapter 1, titled Her, in which I reflect upon my marriage and my divorce. The poem is called Love in Hindsight. I see it all now in 2020 vision, the ugliness and the pain, the beauty and the pleasure, the lies and the truths, the give and the take, the tears and the smiles, the beginning and the end. I look back now in 2020, and it is easy to say, well, I always knew. Then, not so much. In the beginning, she charmed with pleasure and beauty, warm in body and form, love promised ease and contentment. Though now I can see love masking the lies, giving way to pain and tears, to fear and hate, and in the end, truth. Understanding her, at last, my fickle love turned hate. Next we have, from chapter 2, titled My Second Love, in which I reflect upon my alcohol abuse. The poem is called Barstool, one of my favorites. It beckons to me like the intoxicating sirens of yore, luring me to my doom with familiar trance, like an old friend awaiting, ready to lean on. A welcome sight after a hard day, like a mirage to the desperate and thirsty traveler, making promises of satisfaction and rapture, wrapped, mesmerized, and blinded, like the forlorn sailor, I crash into my desire, only to discover the danger of my deal far too late. Raging and railing within my hall, like a tempest shaking a sailing skiff. Swaying and swinging, I feel unsure of my settings. Maybe it's just this wobbly stool. No. I begin to notice the leaks in the boat, and I start to fill with dread. The fear of drowning overtakes my horizons, and, like a treasure-seeking adventurer of yore, I charter my ship towards the shores of sobriety. The last I have today is from chapter 3 called Healing Hands, in which I analyze the way that I maintained and found sobriety. This poem is called Chopping Wood. There's true power in holding an axe, and a wise man always tips the headsman. Occasionally, in a ritual I'd partake, as the moon began to wax. I'd put on shoes, adorn gloves, grab my axe, and then I'd line a piece up. It didn't matter which one. With precision, chop, hack, slice, until my work was done. All the pieces were the same, stand-ins for crimes and offenses committed against my person on the daily. The death toll continues to rise, reports the Times. Square up, shoulders with the chopping block, ready to breach the Bailey. More nonsense out of Washington in the West Wing. Your dominant hand will guide and glide the descending swing. Concerns and opinions berate and penetrate me daily, pushing me to the edge. Striking the wood center stage with force and precision is key. Months ago, I made a sober promise. To not drink was my pledge. Be mindful of how you stand and cut. Striking with force can be bad for your knees. I'm pretty good with an axe now. I've thrown all my anger into cathartic fire. Always be sure to build yours a sturdy and brilliant pyre. I'll have to leave the news off, lest I risk my heart becoming colder. Once finished with this fire, be sure to contain the smolder. Thank you for your attention and time.
Thank you, Noah. That was great. I know you've been working on those for a while, and I think you said in maybe your critical introduction or somewhere in your writing about what it was like to go back and look at sort of the artifacts of this, other part of your life.
Right.
And I think a lot of people can identify with that. And I think that I admire you for doing that, because that's not easy.
It's difficult to do that, especially with someone who dwells on things too. But I think especially
like writers.
Right. Especially during, this process of writing and doing that, normally if I had just been perusing those things, I would probably become quite depressed. But by doing it and then writing, it was a much healthier way to just kind of accept it and understand it. So yeah, that was an interesting part of that.
Well, and far better to face it than to keep running from it, right?
Right, absolutely.
You know,
Yeah.
and you do have a comment here from Dr. Vanderland who says that Barstool has some great images and illusions. It sounds like good therapy. I like the connections you make to the personal and global. And I agree. I think of all the poems that I've read in this collection, that's probably one of my favorite ones.
Thank you.
Very well done.
Yeah, it's one of the ones I was most personal with and familiar with. You know, seeing my fair share of Barstools over the years.
Yes, as you would from what you said.
Right.
So thank you all very much. I'm going to bring the rest of the class back on. Some of them have their cameras off because they were just kind of chilling. And just to say thank you to everyone and see if any of the people that are watching might have some questions or comments. I missed this one by Dr. Murray. He says, nice work, Kortnie. I like the semantic dimensions of American Thick. And I really love that poem or that piece because I think that it was so descriptive and really, really rich. Dr. Murray also had a comment for Rachel. He says he enjoyed your poems. They're brief and poignant. So do any of you have any questions for your fellow classmates and your fellow writers?
Yeah, I'm interested in Kortnie's stuff. I like her images of like her description of food because I think that's just like something so sensory, and you know, it's really relatable. And I think that's a really effective way of, you know, connecting readers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
lunchtime too, so we're probably all hungry. Right. Dr. Vanderland says that she has some comments, but she'll send them out individually to you. And Dr. Go says that she sent the hand watching emoji, but she meant to clap. And we have more people offering applause to all of you. And, you know, you really have done a great job this semester. This isn't a semester like any other semester where we would have been able to just kind of be together and work on our projects, but you have found a way to do it and to do it really well. Dr. Carlisle says, nice job, everybody. Strong presentations. And I agree. I haven't a complaint for anyone. So that's always good. All right, then I will see everyone, just a different set of faces on the screen back here on Thursday for the second half of our presentations, about 12:15, so the same time. Thank you all so very much, and for representing California University of Pennsylvania well, and our English program. And I think this demonstrates that, you know, the relationship you can build at Cal with your faculty and with your fellow writers and with peers in your classes, it's a real thing. So thank you all very much. I'll see everybody on Thursday. Bye, everybody.